Welcome back to PCH Pit. We're back for another season of FRC. We've got a special episode for some post-kickoff reaction with a number of FRC mentors. We're going to have a few discussions about the current state of the district for the PCH district, some strategies for this new game, potential robot designs we might consider or suggest to various teams, and everything in between. But before we get started into that, we'll talk about, we have a disclaimer. So before we get started, we have the usual disclaimer. Any views or opinions shared on this show are solely that of the individual contributor and do not reflect the views of PCH Pit, any FRC team, First, Georgia First, or any of their affiliates or sponsors. So the idea behind this show is to serve as an FRC talk show that focuses primarily on the Peachtree District. We're talking about some of the variety of topics, so don't be surprised to see us drop some hot takes. Ultimately, we're hoping to provide some entertaining and engaging discussions. So with that, we're going to start with introductions. We'll start with Thomas.
Hello, my name is Thomas. I'm a current strategy mentor for Team 1746.
Hello, my name is Kyle. I am a provocateur, a troublemaker, and on-air personality for Georgia First.
My name is Kellen Hill, current lead mentor for Team 1746, Auto.
I'm Brian Carlson, a strategy mentor for 6829 Ignite Robotics.
All right, great to have everybody back. We're excited for another season. So first topic we're going to jump into is the state of the PCH district. So it's obviously been a while since we've had a new season or live competition events outside of some off-season events. So we're going to talk about some things that have changed since March 2020 when we last had in-person competition. So first up, what's the change? One of the biggest changes that's happened is a bit of a drop in team count. So we, I think, finished in 2020 with about 85 or 86 teams.
Right about.
Yeah.
And we're down to about 66 teams. What do you guys think of any changes that have occurred amongst that number dropping down to 66?
I mean, I think it's because obviously the elephant in the room is COVID, but I think COVID kind of just highlighted a lot of the cost inefficiencies that happen when you're having a FRC team and when you see a lack of opportunity to basically build up your base of students, everything else, like a truly effective way to do that, as well as sponsors are starting to pull out when they're trying to do cost-effective measures and everything else. You're going to see some of these teams drop off that don't have that solid set of sponsors, that solid set of mentors as well. Because I've realized through talking to other teams that the mentor recruitment process has been tough during these last 2 years.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest thing is losing a lot of the team. The weirdness of a lot of the mid-tier teams stayed in Georgia, but the teams that we lost either the two heavy hitters being 4910 and 1102, both leaving the district, with 1102 having to make the move back to South Carolina. And we only have 8 new rookie teams this year, and a lot of the old rookie teams just aren't returning. And that's just the unfortunate state of things. Something I hope we can see a lot of these teams come back after a couple years away.
I also think it's interesting how teams are changing and evolving. With the almost 2-year gap, you're going to have a lot less experienced students on the team. And I know a lot of teams are looking at this as a time to sort of reset how to do stuff. And some of the things they may want to change, they're like, okay, let's try to do it now. So it'll be interesting to see how teams come out of this and how they're sort of different and have used this opportunity to maybe improve their program.
So one of the things I want to talk about before we get into the next part of this is, does it also make sense as the district moves forward, and honestly what we see across the first landscape, that we may see more of that move to district model? Because I think a big part of what we went to the district model for was to have that kind of close-knit community between teams to be able to kind of build up each other. And I think especially as we get to we're getting to the point where we're now losing teams, what I think has been a really great point about us moving to a district model is the effort between a lot of the more local teams, like the different bunches of teams is that they've been working together to keep alive their individual teams, to keep morale high as well. It's been a real opportunity to kind of stretch our imagination on how we can foster community within, locally. And I think that happens, especially here in Georgia, because of that district model.
Yeah, and that's where I'd hope to see that some of those teams that have dropped out since 2020, hopefully it's a situation they're able to come back in the future. But I like Brian's comment, too, that there's been a substantial change even for the teams that are returning based off of the experience level of their current student base. So I think we're in for a lot of interesting and new experiences for this upcoming season based off of those changes. Another significant change for this upcoming season is that we've had a shift to a single championship event. We're down from, I believe, our former 17 qualification spots back in 2020. Our PCH will only qualify 9 teams, I guess 10 in counting our Hall of Fame team of Kell Robotics. Any thoughts on qualifying for one of those 9 spots?
Win states.
Win states.
Win states.
You got to play the district. You're not playing the game now. More than ever, you're playing the district. Because if you want to get into one of those spots, you have to be looking at all the different district events to see what's the strategy there, what's the meta in each of those different events. And then finally, when you get to state, you got to win state. That is where you have to win the game, finally. But I also think, I'm kind of, I've been clamoring about it since it happened. It's weird to have 2 championships, even though the reality is it helps in terms of allowing more teams to be able to get into the World Championships, to have that staged moment. But I think getting back to one championship, and if it continues on, awesome, honestly. I think it forces teams to think more competitively. I got to fight for this. I can't just rest on my laurels. I can't just rest on the fact of district points. I have to make sure every single match I'm fighting for that point. Yeah. So it's important.
And I think if anything, this change with there only being 9, I believe the breakdown is 3 of those 9 are the 3 state championships winners, and then 4 of those go to awards with 2 EIs, 1 chairman's, and 1 rookie all-star. Which only if there's no overlap, if everything is independent, that leaves only 2 other teams to be the quote-unquote district points, which will more often than not, the way the points have looked out, be the captain and the first pick of that finalist alliance. So I think something teams need to prioritize is not only do you have to win your events, is you have to seed high, because a lot of the district points come from being that alliance captain or that first pick. So chasing the ranking point this year, you can't just do what Ottawa has done in the past of we're just going to score really good, doesn't matter where we rank. You are going to have to rank well if you want to make it to Worlds.
Yeah, so for those who are new and don't understand the district point system, typically if you win a district qualifier, you get about 70 points. At states, those points are tripled. So you get 210 for that same thing that you would have got at District 1, right? So you don't have to win every one. So there's a couple ways to get in. One is you win a lot of qualifiers, right? So you bank those points. Or just sort of make it a season-long progression where we're just trying to get better every time. But at states, we need to be on our game,
right,
and try to get to the finals.
You do. Now, Thomas, one thing that you brought up earlier, what was that point differential that looked like, before we went into this weird time of COVID? What did that look like for 2019? What did that point spread look like? So in 2019
with the 17, sorry, let me pull it up.
Yeah.
With the 17 teams getting in, the lowest qualifier, 4468, got in with 157 total district points. Whereas the team that would have gotten in with this year's rule, 832, had 258, and that was so there's definitely a significant, if you're not chasing the chairmans or the other culture awards, you're going to need to be on the money to get those to get to Worlds. So you're going to need about 258 district points.
And going for the cultural awards even now, I think is going to be even more interesting, because for a lot of these teams, I think Georgia has had it a little bit, I probably would say, easier in being able to get out a little bit more to be able to do outreach. But even still, going out for outreach is been hard during these times, and so I'm wondering with those culture type awards, we're gonna have to, I think, see a game changer in terms of how outreach is done. That's what you're gonna be seeing those culture awards between what you're doing with chairmans in terms of that outreach versus an EI where it's a traditionally like a team built award. So how is your team built? What's the standard on your team, as well as what are you doing outside of your team? So I think it's going to come down to how logistically are you taking what we've learned in these last 2 years with COVID and everything else, and as we move forward with build processes, as we move forward with all logistic processes, how are you making that into being an award-winning team?
The other thing that changes with this year is that we've dropped from 5 district events to 4. So when you get to state championships, you're talking about a competition between 4 Chairman's Awards winners that one of them is going to win, and then 4 EI awards that are coming from the district level that 2 of them are going to win. So that competition tightens up a little bit because we're only talking about 4 district events instead of 5.
And we do have a lot of teams that have stepped up their game to be able to be Chairman's Awards and EI winners. Like that vacuum that was created by Kel now is filled with a lot of teams that are like, I can be that model team.
Mm-hmm. All right. So for some other changes, again, getting back to our events, is taking a peek at the PCH schedule for the upcoming season. So obviously, all teams have registered for their events to this point, so we have a sense of the level of difficulty or perceived difficulty per events based off of kind of teams' track records. So Brian, I think you've done a bit of looking into the PCH schedule. What events really pop out in your mind?
Being the first event being Dalton, I think that one's pretty stacked. All the, if you look at the top teams the past few years are going to be there. It's going to be very interesting how they play, especially with the first event. I expect Walton to do well. With the loss of ECR and 1102 making magic, there's probably about 4 or 5 really strong bots that can actually lead their alliance champion to the win.
So, I mean, if I'm looking here, so taking a look at Dalton, because as we always say, like being one of those honestly prototype teams to go out, see how the game's played and how it works. It's a week 2 event, so you at least have some time to be able to kind of figure out a little bit more of the meta of the game and just see how it works in gameplay. But, for Dalton, a lot of these teams are perennial, like, we're going to be at that first event to see how it works. Obviously, Auto is going to be at the event. You have IHOP 1414, Kel, you have Oscar. I mean, all these teams, Walton. And 68 and Walton, obviously, and obviously 6829 as well. And so I think it will come down to at that event of one. I think it comes down to scouting as well, because I think taking the right data at that second event after you figured out what happened in week 1 will be essential to being. I think if you are probably you probably need that balanced alliance for this game. Being in those first 3 seeds is going to help, I think, with that effort.
Yeah, and I think this year more than any other year is unique in that you're going to be you're not saying that you're going to see more upsets, but the fact that due to the limitation in the amount of balls, I can very well see this year being one of the most competitive years elims wise, because if you're a team that already has 2 really good scorers, you're not going to want that third. So all the good scoring threats are going to end up spread out down, especially at deeper events.
But I think when you have games like, and we'll talk more about the game later, when you have had games repeatedly, we've had 2 years of a shooting game. Yeah. We have a 3rd year now of a shooting game. I think we have had more than enough examples for teams to be able to go back to be able to figure out how to create a sustainable shooter. So I think shooters are probably, it's not just going to be shooters, it's going to be the strategy people. Like, it's going to be the Kellens that's going to figure out, okay, how do I game this to be able to get to a finals? How am I going to game this to be able to get to a finals? It's like 2015. I think it was 2015 or 2014 with Peachtree, where it's like you had to basically figure out that strategy so you can basically flip the averages and beat Walton in 1261, I believe, in that year. That's going to be how it's going to come down to strategy, because shooters, I think, are going to be plenty. It's going to come a lot down to just strategy, which I think Dalton, being that first event, that's going to be where you're going to have to be able to come straight out the gate with a good strategy.
And there's huge district point implications for that first event.
Ooh, yeah.
Which, with all those powerhouse teams being there, if you're not, again, in the finals or champions of that event, those district points you're going to have to find them at your second event. But the other interesting part about that is usually there's an event that kind of sticks out as the precursor or preview of what a state championship's going to look like. In this case, that's our very first event of the season, and I don't think Dalton's going to be a show to watch, but I think teams are going to learn a lot between weeks 2 and week 6 when district championships happen. So I think we'll get a glimpse of what high-level play might look like, but it's going to be quite a show at state champs by the time we get there in week 6.
True.
All right, moving on for some other, one last thing for anything that's changed. At this point, nothing has been announced from Georgia First in that there's going to be any changes to or head caps on event restrictions for head count. But something we'd advise teams to be ready for is just being flexible and prepared for any changes or restrictions that might come out. Something we learned heavily during July heat or grits is that you have to have a very prepared strategy plan if you're doing your strategy off-site.
Strategy and scouting.
Yeah. So it's what else do you think teams should plan for in the event that there is a head count restriction?
In the event that there's a head count restriction, I think teams should nominate a designated communications person who is one of the people who's at their event, especially strategy-wise, who their job isn't necessarily only to do this, but their job is to answer the phone when the strategy people call and to call the strategy people when there's a question to be asked. I think that type of delegation is going to be really important, so there's a clear line of, I need to take to somebody, I call this person because it's their job. And that type of thing will ease the type of growing pains there are when you have a significant part of your team, especially with this year being, as Kyle said, a year that's really dependent on strategy. You need to have something that this person that's on the remote site will call this person and vice versa who's at the event. That way there's nothing ends up being muddled.
I think another thing that's actually really good, a communications person, but I think a second thing is I think teams, and I say this for students and mentors alike, I think that they have to be ready to be flexible and versatile. You know, a lot in first, and in FRC specifically, we can sometimes get very siloed into we're doing just mechanical, we're doing just electrical, we're doing just these things, which there are positions for that, but if we're talking about very restricted counts, that's going to require people to stretch outside of their normal kind of expectations of what they would do in an event, because you're dealing with those lower counts. So you may have someone that would usually be just maybe a freshman that's usually maybe just shadowing or whatever else. They may have to be ready to jump in when need be. So it's going to be important to take into account everything that's happening, kind of just take it up like a sponge. Like whatever's in front of you, take that time to learn, because it may come into play when you're at one of these events. Because as we know, whether you're on pit crew, whether you're on drive teams or whatever else, there are split-second decisions that need to be made. And you have to be ready, like as a team member, to say, I'm calm, I'm collected, and I can handle this situation as a stakeholder in this getting like settled.
And I think something else that's important with the state of the world, I think teams are more than any other year. I think I really recommend that teams have a first and second string with a lot of their key positions to bring to events. Where in years past, it was very unlikely that you might lose a drive team member because they're your most committed members. Nowadays, that it couldn't be out of their control. So I really recommend that teams they're practicing not just their drive team, but have practicing a second drive team, and also practicing like just swapping out and randomizing to where you have one 8-person drive team where everybody knows how to work with everyone else. and just in the event of if you're all of a sudden your driver has COVID, and same with the pit crew as well. And I think it'd be very beneficial and like make sure instead of having all your kids be this kid's just an expert and I'm an expert in electrical, don't make them an expert in electrical. Say, okay, you're already good at electrical. Don't be an expert. Go be good at something else. That way you have the ultimate coverage just in case people aren't able to go to events. And I think that and the communication, I think that will be the road for more success in the event of limited attendance and outbreaks.
And so part of that is, this year's a little different, right? And so if we're in a restricted headcount event, it's really important for teams to start getting connected with other teams, because when you do that scouting, you're going to need that help and collaboration. I agree about the communication. That's one of the issues that I found at Grits was, the scouting team was back remote, and I'm like, can you give me give me some information for the pick, right? And then they have somebody else talking to the person on the field, because it's very strange to be in that disconnected environment. Even at the competition, if you're having problems, talk to the other teams, because this year more than any, you're going to need to get through this together and help each other out. Share scouting data and all that kind of fun stuff.
And patience. I think that's going to be key. I think I figured that out with the July Heat event in Grits. It's patience. Like, we always say gracious professionalism, have it, show it to your team and to other teams as well as your volunteers. But I think that really kind of comes into key here for this next year, because there's going to be a lot of new things that we're trying out and we're having to kind of navigate around. So patience with that, as well as just being able to make sure that you are communicating with Georgia First on a regular basis, and making sure that you know your contacts, know who to contact for the senior mentor, making sure that if you're having issues, making sure to contact Connie or the people on the planning committee, because at the end of the day, we can only be as good as our weakest part. And so it really comes down to making sure that you are not going last minute to ask questions that can honestly be asked at the beginning of the season, because Georgia First is here to help all of our teams to make sure that they can get to the finish line. And so it's important to speak up when you need to speak up.
I think a lot of great comments there. Key takeaway: be ready for anything. But obviously a lot of changes in PCH this year. I think there's a lot of exciting opportunity lying ahead. Speaking of that opportunity, let's get into the excitement. Let's talk about this new game. What are some initial reactions to this game?
Too many teams are going to build a swerve drive this year, and it is wrong.
You are not wrong.
Too many teams. I cannot stress this enough. Listen.
Look at the camera right there. Look at the camera.
An open field. Do not build a swerve drive. Don't do it. It's a trap. Listen, you may have built a swerve drive for July Heat or Grits or what have you. Do not do it. There's a difference to when you're playing a game the second time than playing a new game this year. I think, if anything, teams should go simple this year. Teams are greener than they ever have been. Those big boy teams we like to all harp on, they're pretty much everyone's on a level playing field of being at ground zero. I know personally on auto, we have just one student who has been through a full actual FRC season before, still on the team since 2019. The only people who have been through, realistically, a full FRC season on these teams are seniors. And I think, if anything, teams in the district should be focused on getting the knowledge from those seniors down to the lower students. And the best way to do that is to go simple.
Okay. So, counterpoint. Counterpoint.
I like it.
Listen, counterpoint. Swerve drives create great content.
Yes.
Content is king. So, if you create a swerve drive, I'm not going to be mad at it because it's going to be hilarious.
Yeah.
So counterpoint.
I agree that swerve drive is simultaneously the best decision and the worst decision.
Like, this is an open field game, like 2014 vibes here. I am so excited.
And that's one thing that makes me annoyed of why couldn't this have been the 2019 game? If this was the 2019 game, the state of the district was in, it would have been insane.
Well,
everyone would have gone swerve and done so well.
I will hope, and I don't know the game design committee personally, but I would think you had multiple years to be able to come out with a banger of a game like for 2022 for us to be able to say we're coming back in person. Let's figure out how we're going to say stay in this program. And I think this game combines a lot of the best elements from places like 2014 where you talk about aerial assist, where we talk about the open field, to 2013 when you talk about ultimate ascent with the climbing option, to when you talk about our middle of the field, you have your 2012, 2016, now 20, was it 1920, was it 1920, 21? Yeah. Like shooting games, like you have a game that kind of encompasses a lot of ability for people to start out from ground zero, but to ascend so high with the robot.
Yeah, and I think something that this year, the game that this game reminds me the most of isn't the 2014s or the 2013s.
2009?
It's 2017 for one reason alone. I think there's going to be, at the highest level of play in this game, it's going to devolve to a game of chicken of who's shooting last. Which, just to watch, just like in 2017, watching, okay, there's going to be a careful line that teams have to have of, do I keep shooting or do I go climb? And like in 2017 St. Louis finals, a team stopped shooting early, went to go climb, and that's the reason why 254 won St. Louis, is because they kept shooting, the other team didn't. And I think this year, I don't think on Einstein you're going to see bots going for the highest rung. I think it's going to end up being, let's shoot as much as possible and get as much people on the lower two rungs.
Depending on how quickly you can get to that high bar, reversal bar, because if you can score, was it 15 points in one fell swoop?
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of what?
Is it 15 or 16?
15, you need 16 for the RP.
There you go.
Otherwise, you're talking about then, so the equivalent is then 15 low goals or what, 7.5 high
You're
goals.
going to get the 6 point for the low, right? The low rung. So it's really a 9-point differential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was actually surprised it wasn't a pick and place game. I was actually thinking it'd go that. I mean, we had 2 years of a shooter. I think it plays well with what we have this year as far as our experience. We got a lot of junior people on teams, but it's a game they're kind of familiar with.
Right.
Bot-wise, it's similar to 2020. You can take a lot of that stuff and redesign it and sort of play this game. I like the open field because I think there's going to be a lot of defense. There's not a lot of places where you can protect yourself and shoot and not be harassed.
Defense wins championships.
That's one of the first things I look for in a game, particularly shooting games, is where is the safe place?
Yeah.
And there is no safe
places.
There's a couple safe places, but there is
It's
not
terrible
really
to shoot from those safe places.
Exactly, it's terrible.
there is significant distance away from the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think that's beautiful, because in years past, if you look at like in 2020, the last shooting game we had, you couldn't play defense on anybody because the two safe zones you had great shots from.
So from that protected zone, I forget what it's called, right? You're closer than we were making shots from the switch in 2020, and we're shooting those in. So it's a nice big wide target. It's like 3 feet in diameter, and your ball's only 10. And you're coming down
the goal
low.
is like this instead of like this.
Yeah, but you see,
the ball is oblong.
But you're going to lob it like 2017, right?
So you're going to lob it like 2017, but I want to really talk a little bit more about this defense. So talking a little bit like about these rules, right? So what is defense going to look like? Because for me, I was thinking immediately with 2014, the nickname that we came up with for the game instead of aerial assist was aerial assault, because literally you are smashing into other robots at high speeds. Like you're talking like football style, like hard hits. So what is this game going to look like with defense?
I think it's hit the robot that is sitting still hoping to shoot. I think that's and then trying to prevent them from being in zones and shepherding them. This year there are very few places to get balls, and there are very few balls in general. So I think there's going to be the defense of hitting people, and then there's also the defense of just sucking your opponent. If you're on the blue alliance and you're playing defense, you're going to be scoring for the blue alliance. Pick up 2 red balls and just keep those red balls in your robot the entire match, because that's 2 less opportunities for the robots to score. And I think there's going to be legitimate strategies centered around
starvation.
we can't score, but you can't either.
Exactly,
You know?
starvation. It's literally and I think it's different for this game, where I think one of the few first games. I'm not just talking about FRC. I'm talking about like all the different like leagues. There's only been one game that I can think of where it can come down to starvation, like this can get to, which is like a 2012 FTC game where literally the state championship was decided by one ring. Like, the robots fought for 2.5 minutes over one ring, and it all came down to just dropping the ring in the right place. This is that type of game where it can come down to literally, you can, like you guys said, it's playing chicken. You can take up all those balls, and it's just down to who's going to get that last shot.
Right. If you think about it, there's 11 balls in the field, right? If you have a lead against an alliance you're trying to outgun, if you grab all 3 bots grab 2, there are 5 balls left. Their 2 bots are going to have 4 of them. So that means 1 ball's on the field, and you can stand between them and that 1 ball, and they have to wait 7 seconds for the balls to come back out and stop bouncing before they can get another cycle in.
And you also have to count in as well. That's not including, are we thinking contact as well? Because there's going to be harassment on a whole nother level.
Well,
yeah.
So drawing comparisons to 2020, a lot of teams, you start on the auton line, obviously, in 2020.
Right.
A lot of teams are like, oh, if I'm shooting there for auton, I may as well shoot there for all my shots. But it's not a protected zone.
No.
So a lot of teams got away with it for most of qualifications and ranked highly because of it.
But the meta changed.
But then you hit eliminations, and the strategy entirely changes. The other alliance knows where you're shooting from.
Right.
And if you don't have a designated sweet spot, or you can't get to the designated sweet spot, as you can kind of see on the field diagram, we got 4 close shots you can get to.
4 close ones.
For having a nice square layup shot like you would have right on the wall in front of the 2020 goal. So it'll be interesting to see how teams use their more visible 2 of those 4 shooting spots to shoot from.
Defenders.
Well, and how defenders will impact their
basically.
ability to shoot from those places. Because again, your defender's not going to have a great view on those 2 spots that the other team's shooting from.
True. I will say in this game it is also a big strategy of you're having to figure out in the beginning of, okay, which alliance station am I going to be in? Because that's also your visibility. Like if you're in that number 1 spot on the alliance station, you're done. It's not even that you're done, but you do have to make sure that vision is a key component in that type of design, because you need to be able to have that visibility no matter if you're in Alliance Station 1, 2, or 3.
Especially in late in the match, if you're in elims, if you have the 2 climbing teams and one team that is staying out scoring, if you're that team that's staying out scoring and you're in the line Station 1, what am I supposed to do? I can't see because there are robots climbing in front of my face. I think that's going to be a very interesting thing, where I'd hope that first would say, like at Champs, where you can say as an alliance captain, say, okay, my people are going to be in this alliance station. I wish they would do that in all eliminations brackets at the district events.
And to make a call out here for an excellent resource, the team should look into as early as possible. Automation Direct also releases a VR version of the field, so you can experience the full field in VR without having to build the full field at your facility. So make sure if you have the capability, or if you know some other teams with the capability, is get a VR set on and get that view from what Player Station 1 looks like. So check out, I think it's posted on First website for a link to Automation Direct's VR field, but take advantage of that resource.
Automation Direct, sponsor of 1746 Auto.
The game animation was actually the last couple years that every team watches is made by 1746 alumni.
That is true.
And his dad.
That is true.
Yeah. So it's awesome to see those alumni from way back in the day when 1746 got started, still making a huge impact in First.
So I do actually want to bring up something as well. Now that we're bringing up 1746, and we're bringing up the climbing option. Are we going to see teams that are going to be climb strategists? Like they're going to literally just master the climb. Like I believe it was 2013 with 1746. That was the robot. Literally starting off, going from level 1 to level 2, level 3. They could do it like with no problems whatsoever.
I think we will see that. I don't think teams should, for just strictly one reason. If you're chasing the ranking point, which teams definitely should, it's unique in years past where you could get that ranking point by just being only one team getting that high bar. 2020 is a little bit different. But like in 2019, if just one team got in that third level, all another team needed to do was park, and then you get the ranking point. I think it's a lot easier for teams to get that ranking point if they prioritize just scoring as many balls in the low goal as possible.
But if you're talking about winning matches, if the one singular action you can pull off scores 15 points.
Yeah. If you look at, if that's one thing I noticed in this game, the value of climb is not as significant as previous games. In 2020, you get 35 points for a level climb. In a qualification match, you're getting 70 points. That's half the score. It's going to be less than 20% roughly of the total score. So, the value is going to be in shooting. I think the easier ranking point would be the shooting one. So I would focus on scoring because that's also going to help you win the game.
So I'm going to be Herm Edwards for a second, talking about playing the district. How many teams do you think are going to just strategize into climbing or strategize into defense?
How many rookies do we have?
So I think the typical defense bot in PCH is never really intentionally built for defense. It's always we have attempted to score, we have attempted to climb. We don't have those functionalities. We're reverting to defense.
Sure.
I don't think very many will, because I think if you look at 1261 in 2020, and they built every bot, and we're very effective. Every bot this year will be very effective. And so you don't have to be a defense bot. You could build something very easily following that pattern and have a fun time playing this game.
Yeah, and if you are looking for defense, look no further than 1771 with their Baltic Birch masterpiece. I don't think they have Luis driving that puppy anymore, but we all know Christopher Wilson will tell them to go lay down the hammer.
Because Luis still coaches them. So they did that at July Heat and at Grits, and I saw him coaching that second team to like a nice defense being played. So
on that sense, instead of ignoring defense until it's your team's only option, I'd highly recommend understanding how to best play offense for this game, but also understand how to best play defense for this game. So if the situation arises, you're ready for it instead of just figuring it out on the fly.
I would like to ask a question. So if we're scratching off Swerve, are we also scratching off Mechanums?
Mechanum should never be used ever. Whoever uses that to drive, it's like you have the bad stuff about Swerve and the bad stuff about I can't push anybody.
At Albany in 2019, we were 3v1 in our first match, and Reset Robotics comes over, starts playing defense against us. We're like, really? You're going to win this match? But they had mechanisms. We were fine. We pushed them halfway across the field. But please leave us alone. Let us try.
It's just content.
I think the only argument in that case, especially if Mechanum's trying to play defense, is essentially just park in front of the one wall on the other side's team, on the other side of the goal, in order to try blocking off one of those close shots.
So, in regards to Kyle's comment about heavy defense, right? Understand how to build quality bumpers.
Quality bumpers, and not just quality bumpers because that's important, but also a quality system and subsystem when you're talking about the actual structure of the robot. You don't want something that is that's sliding a bunch. You want something that can be robust, that can get in and out of matches, and especially for design, some design considerations. You want something that can be easily replace when you're talking about having to replace stuff, or just in general a tank of a robot.
Design it to take some hits. I think more than every year, if you're building something, I believe I heard stories of teams where they build it, they test it, it's like, all right, that's good, and then they drive it full speed into wall. And like drive robots, design them to be able to drive just full bore into walls.
Like full send.
Because that's going to happen. And it's going to be worse because there are going to be multiple times where you have two robots coming from opposite sides of the fields going full speed, hitting each other. And you want to make sure 4188 lost world championships because they got hit so hard it tripped a breaker. And they ended up dead in a penalty zone. So you're going to want to build your robots to be robust.
Yeah, true.
We have some initial reactions there to the game. I think we went a little long on some of our takes.
And the design, we did talk about design as well. We've talked a little bit more about design as well.
Yeah.
Because, like, realistically, right, we've talked about, when we're talking about the shooting aspect of the game, we've had three plus years of basically shooting at this point. So a lot of that in terms of the goals is it's easy to reach that goal of being able to make those shots. And especially now that you're not having to worry about a specific going through that inner port where you're having to do a lot of programming to be able to get precisely in there. Now it's just a nice lob shot. Although you are going to want a good bit of programming, so that is just a nicely tuned shot. But in terms of a nice goal is just to be able to get to have that nice shot, have a nice high shot and a nice low shot. Especially low shot, not to have a shot that's going to bounce out easily. You obviously have the chains that are there, but just have that nice low shot and a nice high shot. I think that's the easy goal.
And we'll segue from there on shooting. High goal or low goal?
I think being able to do both is going to be really, really valuable. I think when you're in quals and you're chasing that ranking point, being able to just to dump as many balls as possible to the low goal is going to be really, really valuable. But once you get to where eliminations, where it's not necessarily where you're trying to make as much points out of every cycle you do, being able to quickly pivot and go, okay, I shoot high goal now, I think that's going to be really, really, really beneficial and might catch some teams by surprise if they're not keeping track of what you're able to do. I think being able to have that surprise factor of surprise, I'm high goal now, that will be very, very beneficial for some teams.
I think a lot of this will seem like 2016, right? Mm-hmm. The low goalers ended up being usually the first and second alliance.
They were.
Captain, right? But they always needed the shooters from there.
They did.
And maybe as season goes on, that becomes more shooters overall. But I think early on, it's going to be good. The other thing is the benefit of the low goal, it's a 5-second drop time instead of 7.
Right.
The balls aren't bouncing, and they roll out on the floor kind of where you're at, so they can probably be nearer to the fender and the target than you would normally be.
So, Brian, one quick question. What do you think the ideal cycle time would look like? Let's talk about for, let's say, a week 2 event, and then let's say as we get down to maybe a state championship. What does that first cycle time look like for, let's say, a high and a low starting off? And then as we get to state, what do you think it would look more like ideal?
I think with defense, I'm not sure you're going to get a lot of like 9 and 10 cycles. I think you're going to probably get closer to state probably around 8 cycles.
8?
Okay. It's a short field, almost like 2019, right? But there's so much defense, and the balls are so unpredictable. If it comes out on the far side of the tower,
right,
you're going to have to go get it because at some point they're running out of balls on this side. So I think what I sort of did when we started analyzing the game was like, I can't predict where they're going to come out. Well, I might have to go halfway across the field, or it might come out here and take an average. It's really kind of hard to figure that out.
But I think that also comes into to the play of, are you depending it? So we have games that are 6v1 sometimes, but I think this is a game where it really is going to come into communication with your other teammates to be able to lessen those cycles, because you're going to have a shooter, you're going to have maybe a robot that's going to focus a lot solely on more defense, but honestly more rebounding. Like if you think about like a 1002 back in 2009. 2009, they had a robot that literally just sucked up balls. That was the literal only point of the robot. But it allowed them to be able to feed the balls where it needed to be to the right shooters. And especially in this type of game, you need to be able to have those robots that can like if you have a alliance of 2 shooters and 1 rebounder, that rebounder can be that person to be able to help on the other side to get those balls back over to those main shooters. Because at the end of the day, if you can have that one person to make sure that those balls get back, then you're able to be more efficient with your cycle times. Versus if you have your 3 shooters and basically you may be shooting at one single part, but luck is on the other side, they're coming out onto the other side, so you're having to interrupt your cycles to go back around, in essence.
I think if your 3 bot, your defensive bot, playing defense, once they sort of get around you, if they can herd balls to your side, that'll be very valuable.
Yeah. I think every team should build an intake in some way to just hold and then spit out balls.
Yeah, in that sense, I think there's a ton of value in that ball control. But if teams are asking the question of, do I need to shoot high goal in order to play this game? Is I'd highly recommend to you is that you can create a ton of value for your alliance by only scoring low goal. If you score low goals all day, you're going to contribute, and your alliance's partners are going to be happy about it.
But district conversation is is that going to make sense in every district, or is that going to make sense just here in Georgia?
I think it's going to be unique in that I think you could see a low goal team making a deep run at Worlds just because of how, again, people are going to run out of balls. And so if you're able, I think you're probably going to be able to starve out. It's a numbers game, right? If I can score twice as much low goal as you can high goal, it doesn't matter if that's your high goal shooter.
And that third bot on a championship alliance or state championship alliance is likely going to be playing a comparable role to that. So if you can be prepared as a robot or as a team to play that role.
Well, I'll point to 2016. Right?
Okay.
At states, the number one and two seeds out of qualifications were low goal bots. They were not high goal shooters. Now, shooters have come a long way since that time.
Exactly.
I mean, I was rewatching those a few weeks ago, and I was like, wow, where we're at now with COTS and our experience, it may be a little different, but it's still going to be very effective.
Yeah, especially, when you have the ability for our Destination Einstein facilities, you have a lot of the teams locally just working together, filling their ideas together. Like, I don't think it's going to be an issue to have really consistent robots. Now, I'm still of the opinion if you play the district and then you're playing the game, I think low goal robot to specialize like you can, but I think at the end of the day it's going to come down to if you're at the World Championship, you're on an Einstein field, like what does that look like? And I feel like you're going to have like an alliance where you're going to have more high goal than low goal.
But I can nearly guarantee you that the top tier teams in the world, if they know they're going to win a match, they're scoring low goals all match, because that's going to be their way to get that RP instead of
you're right.
of shooting a harder 2-point goal. While it's more points, if they have a good feeling they're going to win the match, especially from likely climb points, it's a lot easier to score 20 balls in a low goal than it is the high goal.
Especially if you're making an efficient cycle time, then you can.
Well, the other thing is, if you think about restricted size at Worlds, and as we talked about, you have to be basically the next highest point winners at Georgia. I would guess they're going to be high goal shooters. You're probably going to have less low goalers going to Worlds, or at least specialized low goalers going to Worlds.
There will be one specialized low goaler who's guaranteed to be to Worlds, and that's going to be the third pick of that state championship team. Yep. I think if there's any year to specialize, if we want to be that third pick, this is the year to do it.
And rookie all-star.
Okay.
All right, moving on from high goal, low goal, let's talk a little bit about the ways of earning those ranking points. So obviously, if you win a match, you get 2 ranking points. If you tie, you'll get 1 per alliance. You lose, you get 0. But even if you lose, there's ways to get extra ranking points. We're talking about getting 16 combined points on the on climbs, as well as then scoring either 20 or 18 if you should be really good in auton. Which of those 2 RP do you think is going to be easier access for Georgia teams?
The easiest access one is going to be the 18 balls, just because that is the only one that's theoretically able to be done by just one robot. Like if you want to get the climbing, not only do you need to have more than one robot climbing, but you need to have the easiest way to get the hanger point is to have one team on the high rung or one team on the mid rung. You're going to need to have a team that is able to who's able to move across the bars. It is not possible to get that ranking point with just 2 teams on the low rung or 1 team on the mid rung. You're going to need to be able to go across the rungs.
So in that case, I'm thinking about with the cargo bonus as well. Do you think it's going to be a situation? I'm thinking from all the way from auto to autonomous to the end game. When you're dealing with that, are we going to see a lot more quintets happening in auto, where that means the 20 drops to 18 for later on.
I think that's something that a lot of teams should chase.
But is it going to happen, do you think, in the district?
I think quintets are going to be pretty rare. The ability for an alliance in PCH to routinely score 5 cargo in auton is a significant challenge. There are going to be teams that have ridiculous autons that can score 5 cargo by themselves in auton, but I don't think we're going to see any 5 cargo autons in PCH. I think we're going to see a handful of 3 cargo autons, but then counting on your alliance members to score there too is still a stars aligning kind of thing that I don't think we're going to see that happen too often. But I still think we're going to see quite a few. I think we're going to see more cargo RPs than we are going to see climbing RPs.
Yeah, I would agree. I think climb. If you look at grits, right? They had basically 2 years, and we still only had a handful of climbers there, right? It wasn't a lot. So I think if you try to take that and now make it so you can climb and traverse rungs, would be more that would bite off, especially this year. The way the balls are positioned, it's kind of hard to get nice, easy paths to get them. Additionally, I think Kellen was saying beforehand, if you get 4 in, maybe your human player can throw 1 in and try to get that. But even the double climb RP at grits wasn't very frequent, right?
It wasn't.
The RNG gave you bots that you needed to get enough.
Well, and even if you have the right climbing robots, I think climbing this year, based off of visibility from the driver stations, and that it's tucked in a corner, and that there's a post restricting access, there's not a lot of room to climb in there.
Right.
That I think it's going to, you're going to need a lot of good communication to say, all right, who's going in first? Are they all the way against the wall so there's room for the other two? Having that conversation, I think, again, a lot of difficulty to make that RP happen.
I will say this, though. If teams manage their schedule, right, and they come up with a clear goal and they build towards that goal.
Right.
And if they, if they don't do the every bot, but they do their version of a low goal score and execute that, I think you're more likely to get more RPs in the double climbs at 2020 because that was hard, and pulling off an every bot is easier.
It is.
And so I would say maybe 3 or 4 out of your 12 matches you might be able to pull it off.
3 or 4? Okay. And I think even there, like I was looking at the board, when you're talking about the specifics of that climb, and it's funny that we're dealing with it with this game with Rapid React, talking about shipping and everything else. You're going to have that team that's going to be in that alliance station there.
Show it on the blue side because you cover up the red.
Sure,
alliance.
Good point. So that first alliance station is going to be key as a director to be able to help manage to do that hanger bonus basically every single time. Due to RNG, you're going to have to depend on that. Hopefully, you're going to either have a dry team coach that's able to basically manage that climb over on this side of the field with that visibility, or you're going to have to basically just hope, like in some situations, in our district possibly, where you're going to have those mess-ups where teams are going to basically be in that wrong positioning. So it's really going to come down to making sure for that hanger bonus, if you're going to try to go for it, that you are ready to either manage as a person that's not already in this station, or you're going to have to be able to be patient and willing to receive instruction if you are the team in that space right there. Because you're dealing with a smaller, if you think about it, you're dealing with a smaller alliance station space in this time. If I remember correctly, you're dealing with a smaller alliance station, just slightly.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of small detail that teams should consider instead of just saying, "Oh, we're going to climb." Talk about those that communication or that movement that's going to need to take place at the end of the match. The quicker you can climb, the better. For any low resource teams out there, I'd highly recommend watching how climbing worked in 2013, in that teams with static climbers with no moving parts were able to just latch onto the low rung and get off the ground. I'd highly recommend looking into that design.
With the low rung being able to rotate, is that going to be?
Yeah, it's still, they'll rotate, but your robot's still driving into it.
Yeah.
That you'll still be able to get up and off the ground. So that's an easy 4 points without any moving parts on your robot. So if you don't have a climber or you're thinking about not having one, maybe consider that as a simple option.
Well, that would almost go into, what was the design? I think it was 2013 or 14? 2013, I think, 1648's design. I think it was.
I wasn't
for
in
having
FRC at that point.
having the pyramid for just driving in.
Yeah, they literally just drove forward, they hit that bottom bar, and then they were able to just swing. Easy. It wasn't even a full climber, it's just a nice, easy finish.
Exactly. So again, another way to contribute to your alliance. Let's see. So let's have a little bit of conversation about what you think the average FRC team should build and maybe what a low resource FRC team should build. So a couple quick comments. Pick out something for shooting, something for climbing. What do you think, Thomas?
I think a low resource team should build a robot with a static climber. And something that can I'm thinking of like the power dumpers in 2018.
Yeah.
That were just, you store your balls on the top of your robot, similar to they had stored their cubes, and you're just dumping stuff into your location and being able to be the ball batteries for the scorers in your Elam's Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the.
How about the average FRC team?
Also do that, but climb a little bit better.
Climb a little bit better, like probably to the second rung?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kyle, any thoughts?
All right, so I would mostly agree with Thomas. I think for a low resource team, I think it's going to come down to effective ball management is one. Two, I think being able to score on low goal, just being able to dump. And then just in general, I think it really will come down to a static climb. But I would also say for a low resource team, I would say definitely make sure to be able to, like I'm going to keep saying it, they have to be able to rebound effectively. So I think it's going to come down to making sure that is easy to pick up those balls. It's going to be easy.
Yeah, going for that cargo control.
Yes, cargo control is going to be very key here because, like we said, defense is going to be very high in this game, which means you need to be able to pick it up very quickly and go.
Do you have any suggestions on good intakes for this game?
This, you know what? Listen. In past years, I've been a very ardent critic of the Walton Robotics team. I had to eat humble pie. This worked, so this could work. Now, could this work for this game? Maybe, but I would probably say a good wheeled intake. I think one of the discussions that we were having definitely look at some Velcro, like modified Velcro to be able to grab onto the ball easily, but to be able to let go of the ball easily. So
be careful that your Velcro isn't too strong.
That's what I was saying. It has to be modified.
The field reset people will come after you.
They will. That is true. But like I will say, a design like this could possibly work with these types of balls. But I would definitely say a good wheeled intake or a good bar intake, or definitely a modified Velcro intake.
And if we're talking about Walton, what if they have the Walton spoon from 2016? Do you think that would work this year?
All right, so to provide a bit of background on what Kyle's holding here, I believe there was a missed episode from 2020 that sadly did not get recorded, but Walton wound up gifting us this this initial, I think, prototype intake roller of theirs, cloudly proclaiming that they had figured out the roller intake. They are no longer using the simple, forked intakes.
Yeah.
But they gifted us this intake,
With-
showing off that they had learned some lessons.
With several quotes, several of them from me, unfortunately.
All right.
Yeah.
For some of my comments on those lower average teams, I'd mimic a lot of the comments already mentioned for making sure you're building to your resources. But again, focus on driving consistently. If you can move in auton, you get an easy point. If you can shuttle between the human player and the goal, you can score some points that way. Otherwise, I'd figure out, all right, let's nail down this initial step, and maybe at our second event, we reach for something a little further than that. So I'd suggest teams consider that in iteration throughout the season off of the bat instead of as you discover problems.
I would say look at what you were able to do in 2020. If you're able to do the outer goal and you kind of have a shooter down, you can think about doing the high goal.
True.
If you had problems with the outer goal, I would strictly look at doing the low goal and have that be the decision matrix. So that way you set yourself up for something you can build and execute. Because like they said, if you don't break down and you can play defense and you can do low goal, you will have an effective robot and you will be going to elims.
So considering that, right? So we are in no bag we're in a no bag type of space, right? And so I think when you talk about best accounting for that no bag, I think being able to take the time immediately to figure out, okay, did we do 2020 right? Can we, or 2020, 2021 right, and being able to handle that outer goal and having that shooter that's already there. If not, then they have that little bit of space to be able to deal with it, but you have to remember to basically finish. The goal is to finish early. You want to be able to finish early and get your practice. So to be able to figure out immediately, okay, can I actually do this? And if I can't, let me make a plan to be able to iterate, because the goal is not just build is iterative. Like a good build team will take the time to build a finished product, but to figure out a plan to iterate and to figure out those next steps to basically evolve their robot.
And I think beyond that, this game is going to be very, very dependent on, you might have the best robot out there, but if your driver has not been able to drive it as much as another team, you will lose. Yeah. This game, similar to 2014, is a driver skill game. Yeah. Get the teams. Even if you don't, even if you don't have a completed robot, give your drivers a chassis to drive around and practice on a layout of the field. Let them get a feel for the weight of their robot. If you can think of okay, my robot's going to be 95 pounds. Put 95 pounds of weight in a drive chassis and let them practice driving that around. This year, it's something I can stress. Simple drivetrain, build something that can take a hit, and build something you can get done fast so your boys with the little controllers in their hands can win.
So what does a ideal build schedule look like for this year? Where do we expect teams to be able to have a pretty much basically completed product where they can start practice and basically be ready for that week 2? What are we thinking as an ideal build schedule?
Are we thinking what should happen or what is going to happen? Because those are two very, very
I'm
different.
going to tell you right here and right now, Otto's showing up to week 2 with a fully functional robot.
And we have
you want to put money on that?
That has not happened in years.
The function that you wanted to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I think this year more than any other, especially with the loss of more experienced students, we're going to be very intentional about setting goals, realistic goals off the bat, and having that done early. So like Thomas said, so we can drive the wheels off of the thing before Dalton.
Right.
We're going to show up and be ready because we need to do that in order to have a chance at qualifying for Worlds.
So if we were talking the traditional 6-week build schedule, would you say probably like a week?
I think you want to be done drive. I think you want to be able to drive end of week 4, midway through week 5. I think that is a very, very That's what teams would do. Now, what is going to happen with the vast
Week
majority
4
of
of
teams?
which month? Maybe we might have a little problem.
because there's a week 4 of competition.
So
Yeah.
It's nice. All plans sort of like fall apart at first contact, right?
Sure.
So that's what we're trying to go for week 4, right? You have to have discipline to do that, right? With more inexperienced students, you're going to move slower as a team, and you have to have ways to address that. Either how do you make up schedule, or how do you change functionality?
True.
Oh, yeah.
Luckily, Georgia doesn't have any week 1 events this year, so
True.
teams essentially get an extra week of build before their first events.
They do.
But it's still good to find
That
those
should be
problems
an extra week of practice.
sooner than later. Yep.
True. And just like a Walton quality intake, all it takes is for you to be ready to evolve as a team.
And then also look at the mistakes other teams are making. I think if there's a saying of you need to make 100 mistakes to be successful in something, if someone else has already made that mistake, learn from them. You don't have to, if you've seen copy from other years, if there are plenty of resources that teams can look at, especially the lower level teams, of you don't have to make everything from scratch. You can learn from reverse engineering. I know from myself, I designed the 2019 elevator from Auto, doing it from just looking at 148's 2018 CAD. I learned a lot doing that. And so don't be afraid to copy. Don't be afraid to ask teams and that type of deal.
Yeah, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. This is not like, if you want to reinvent the wheel, go ahead, but you don't need to reinvent the wheel. This should be like, it should flow as a design. This should not be super hard for you to be able to do. Like, it's a challenge, but it shouldn't be something where you're like, you know what we're going to do? Anti-gravity, let's go. No.
Yeah. And don't be afraid, as much as this sounds bad, don't be afraid to give up on something to make sure everything else works. If you are spending all your time trying to figure out how to package a climber and a shooter robot and that's just killing you, don't put a climber on it. Just figure out a shooter, get that robot shooter designed, everything to where the robot can shoot and do well, and then once that is done and the robot is driving, sit down and figure out how to slap a climber on it. Your robot does not need to have everything on it at once. There's no bag, so you have plenty of time of, this is the robot we want to take to Dalton. It's going to shoot, it's not going to climb, and then you're intentionally designing stuff throughout the year.
So my question to you guys, because I think for both teams of 1746 and 6829, you guys have had a little bit more experience in terms of not just iterative designs, but designs that can be quickly manufactured and being put onto a robot in case of an emergency situation. Should teams be counting more on that with this no bag policy for this year, and especially with this game? Should teams be expecting to replace things on their robot?
I think teams should have plenty of spares and be expecting to replace anything and everything that's going to take
Especially
a hit.
have an intake that goes outside of your bumper zone. Make sure you bring in spares. They're going to get damaged. To be ready for that.
Know where the failure point is. So it's like, we're going to design this to break here instead of break the intake. We're going to replace these bolts and stuff. We had that problem in 2018. We're like, that's our sacrificial bolt, right? When we get snapped off, it's just a bolt instead of an arm. Anyway, something else I was going to say. I forget what it was.
Yeah, design things to fail to prevent everything else from breaking.
On this, I think, note, we're coming up with some key, notes for teams to take away from this show. As we move towards wrapping up a bit here, what's everybody's key piece of advice for all PCH teams this season? One piece of advice from all of us. We'll move on to a bit of a fun section here at the end.
Drive the robot as much as possible. I don't think I can state that enough. Driver practice, driver practice, driver practice. Like I said, it doesn't matter if the team has a prettier robot, a better robot than you. If you can drive circles around it, you can drive circles around it. I think some of my favorite years to watch, I think in 2019, I forget the team number, I'm sorry, but their robot looked like an HVAC unit, but their driver was amazing. And that team was able to do so well in quals, was consistently picked in elims.
It was 4701, if I'm
Yeah.
not
It was
mistaken.
4701.
Like the fact that I remember that type of thing. Do not be afraid to design an ugly robot that drives well. Like just drive it. Drive your pants off it. Even if you can't score, you'll be able to play lights out defense because you're that much a better driver.
Okay. For me, I think the big key, to all teams is understand the meta and understand the data. Because I think a big part of this game is going to be the strategy. It's going to be understanding what the numbers look like in terms of your cycles, in terms of the balls that are being able to be scored. But I think you're going to need to understand not just how your alliance is going to be built, but how your opponent's alliance is going to be built. Because at the end of the day, we've talked about this with one championship, 9 spots, realistically, 10 spots including Kell. Every single match matters. And so being able to take advantage of the data that comes, not every single data point is going to bring you the right solution. Take time to understand what that data is, what that data looks like, and what the significance of that data is. Because if you can do that, you will be able to go into each match as a better informed team member, hopefully as a informed captain, and then really being able to be a real winner is going to be a game of data.
So I'm going to say something a little different. I'm going to say join the PCH Mentor Slack channel, and there's a prototyping channel there. I think teams this year need to help manage their schedule, and teams are sharing some of their prototyping data. So instead of trying to figure everything out yourself, you can get some advice on what's been going on and help you pick a more likely successful path as you go down. The fewer problems you have this season during the build season, the more successful you'll be.
And teams, by no means am I saying you should share that little special thing, but there's nothing wrong with sharing stuff from very early on in development to help get people on that right path. This entire thing is about helping each other, the cooperation and gracious professionalism. They're help your teams out. At the end of the day, all of us here want this district to get better, and if you can help each other to learn the lessons and make them, if we can all make the mistakes together and stay in making the same mistake 100 times separately, we will grow so much faster as a district.
So if you want to join the Slack channel, all you got to do is email Kellen at Auto, and he can get you an invite to get on our Slack channel.
Or Brian at 6829.
Yeah.
Brian.Carlson@igniterobotics.com. I'll get it to Kellen.
Yeah, or kellenwhill@gmail.com. We'll get you figured out. My last piece of my suggestion or key takeaway for teams is build to your resources. We have a lot of general notes out here for suggestions to teams, but you're the ones that are most familiar with your skill set, your resources, your abilities. So make sure you're building to that skill set, and don't necessarily take all of our advice. Make sure you filter appropriately when designing or conceptualizing your robots. But that's, I think, always my takeaway for any year, but particularly this one. So yeah, build to your resource set and make sure you're making decisions for your own team instead of taking strategy notes from somebody else. But moving on to an interesting segment here. Before we wrap up, we're going to make a wager in a throwback to some Trevor Davidson days on PCH Pit. We got a couple wagers. First off, how many cargo do you think, what is the most cargo a PCH bot will score in a single match this season? Thomas, put your number on the table.
Why do I have to go first?
No, you
for
have to go
everything?
first. You are the new person here.
Brian will
He's
start
newer
first
than me.
Brian will go first on the next
He
round.
was on the episode before, so you're newer.
The question is, you're basically talking at states?
Throughout the entire
All right.
PCH.
Wait, average? So it's an
No,
average.
no
The
average.
highest-
What is the peak amount?
Peak. Okay. First.
I strongly dislike you guys. I thought you were my friends. I'm going to shoot for the fences. I think there's going to be one team in Georgia that gets 18. I think it's going to happen once. It's going to be miraculous. I think it can happen.
Just
I thought you were talking to the Lions. Or are you talking about one team?
One
No,
single
one single
robot.
team. That's why I'm like,
Oh, No.
Okay.
10.
10?
10 is my magic. That's 5 cycles. I think if a team can get 5 cycles, I think that's going to be impressive.
Kyle, what's your take?
That first one, 18. That's wild. Okay, but no, it could actually happen. But I think realistically, I am going to go for. We're talking peak.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, I think peak could be 12, but I think conservatively it would be 10. Realistically,
Say
I think
12.
it can get higher.
I already picked 10. You are 12.
So I think it, honestly, so I'm saying this off of the basis of knowing that our district has significantly improved. So I think we're going to be able to see a 12 cargo.
All right, I think you're both chickens.
Listen,
I think you're both chickens. If you want to see a hot take, I'll give you a hot take.
Okay,
I
listen.
think there's going to be a match where the other alliance doesn't know what's going on. You're going to see a perfect situation. I think we're going to see a single PCH team score 18 game pieces by themselves in a match.
All right, whatever.
Brian, what do you got?
I'm going 15.
15.
I understand that the 10, but you all forgot about auton. They're gonna get 3 uncontested, right?
You're right.
And if you get a good team, you get 4.
Math.
Right?
Math.
So if you guys want to give
Stupid
auton,
math.
I could have just got
do that
14.
against us, all right?
Hey.
What were you thinking? Luckily for you, you get to go last on the second round.
Dope.
All right.
I already know my answer to this next question.
Second question: how many PCH teams do you think will have the capability of a traversal climb for that 4th rung by the end of the PCH by state championships? Thomas, sit on it for a second. Brian, what's your answer?
I'm choosing between 2 numbers, 0 and 1. I'm gonna go with 0.
I think that's a good idea. Speaking of good ideas, I don't know if traversal climbs make a lot of sense for Georgia teams to. With that said, I'm going to go with 2, just for, I think not a lot of teams are going to do it. Not a lot of teams should do it. But I'll put 2.
No, you put 2 for me.
Oh, whoops. I'm going
You put 2 for me and 0 for him.
Those listening
Had
and watching at home, we have a Google Doc open where we're recording who says what.
Yeah,
and Kellen,
We'll
it's
get
in
that. We'll
reverse.
get that sorted out.
I want that on the record.
We're straightened out. Numbers are right on the sheet.
Okay. Want it on the record. Okay. I am gonna go for the hot take. I am going to go that we will see for a traversal climb. I'm gonna go for 4.
Ooh.
I'm going for 4 because what I'm figuring is most likely we're gonna see majority of the powerhouse teams that are going to go ahead and to specialize, and we'll figure out a climb to a specific level. But I think we have teams, especially from Albany and Dalton, that have gotten have traversed so much to be, unironically, traverse so much to be able to get to this point where they're creating very consistently awesome robots that have great mechanical capabilities. So I think we will see probably a minimum or a max of 4 that will do a traversal climb.
I have 2 answers for this question. Two answers.
2 answers.
I'm answering this question 2 ways. Number of teams that should have a traversal climb in the state of Georgia, big fat 0. Number of teams that will have it, I think, and this is going to be even hotter than Kyle's, I think there's going to be, we have maniacs in this district. We're going to have 6. I think they're going to be robots where they do nothing except get that traversal climb and just do that every match. They start the match, they drive, and they climb, and they get those 15 points. That's going to happen.
Listen, your 0, for all of you, your 0 should make a traversal climb is such a play the district answer that I cannot believe that I didn't make that answer. Listen, 0, let's be honest. We need the crazy people. The crazy people are the ones that get to Einstein, okay? The crazy people are the ones that get to Einstein. So you need those people. Now, will all those...
You can't make Einstein if you don't make it to Worlds, Kyle.
Listen, you will make it to Worlds because playing the district playing the
You
district.
just said if you have a don't have a traversal climb, you play the district. But
No. That's a play the district answer. But realistically, like, you need the craziness. You need to, I think, traversal climbs. Like, we're talking about third robot. That third robot could be the traversal climb robot.
Yeah, and I think one thing that sets it aside is there's a difference between being crazy and being insane. Like,
Both of them are great.
No, guys,
These
listen.
are the takes you came for, people. Yes.
I love how they like, we have the two crazy people and the two reserved people. It is glorious, but like, build within your limits.
Yes.
If you could
And
not
future
climb
climb.
last season,
You
where you
could.
had 2 years to learn how to climb, don't try to do something this year.
How many teams at Grits climbed a single bar?
I have no idea. I was
Very few, let's be honest.
Right? And now they're going to figure out how to climb that and then play Tarzan and go from one to another.
Listen,
there is a way to climb one bar to get that 15 points. I'm not going to say how, but it is read the manual, guys.
Listen.
Read the manual.
Thomas, does
It's
it have anything to
possible.
do with jumping, perhaps? All right. All right, I
Okay,
think we've
Grasshopper.
gone a little bit over time. What I would like to do is make a call out to a couple of special people. We've got a couple people that have contributed heavily to Peach Pit over the past several years. Those people are Sunny Gupta and Trevor Davidson for some of our past commentators. Who else? The other person I'd like to call out is Anupam Goli, who is a teacher and mentor for 1746, who's been working behind the scenes here. Again, helping
Behind the scenes, Anupam. Behind the scenes.
helping us produce some quality content that I'd like to see us keep producing through this upcoming season. So expect to see some more PCH Pit as we get closer to competition season.
Yes. Wait.
We'll give Kyle the ball here.
Yes.
But what I'd like to say at this point is we're going to wrap up the show. We'll keep our eyes out for what you're doing throughout the entire season. Keep it real, PCH. We're out.
Bye.